Okay, I think we're ready to start. I want to thank everybody for joining today. This is a webinar on facility operations using Maximo and ModelStream. I just want to point out a couple of housekeeping things. In the toolbar that you should have on your screen, there's a little chat button in that screen, and you can type in questions that you have right there. And then at the end of the webinar, we'll get to any questions that you have and try to address any issues or anything that comes up that you've seen during the discussion. So we just have a couple more people I'm just seeing popping in here, just making sure that they're all on board. And I think we're all set. So again, we're ready to start here. So we're going to be talking today about facility operations using Maximo and ModelStream. If you're familiar with any of the Microdesk models, a number of different topics, mostly focused around how the data gets from your Autodesk Revit system into your Maximo environment. And there's a series, we have quite a large library of videos that talks about that entire process. Today we're going to be talking more on the Maximo side of things and how do we actually use that information that we're receiving. So that'll be our predominant focus. So myself, I'm George Broadbent. I'm the for Microdesk. I've got about 25 years of enterprise systems experience, largely in information management, enterprise asset management, systems architecture, is different systems that we're talking about, whether it be Revit, building information modeling, asset management, as information sources. And we're looking at how do we allow the information to flow from one area to the next. Microdesk, for those of you that are not entirely familiar with us, we are a global AE steering construction and operations. We have offices around the globe, project offices that we around the globe as well, 250 some odd AECO under our system. So kind of giving you an idea of the type of staff that we have. We are comprised of about 230, this probably has to get updated, 250 consultants. We have about 10 dedicated Maximo certified consultants, almost 500 active projects at any given time. But a large number of our staff have advanced degrees, and we have about 5 PhDs on staff. I have one PhD that's in my staff as well. And this gives us a really wide range of experience and knowledge that we can bring to any engagement. And as you can see, we've got a number of papers that are published on of Maximo and facility operations experience with our staff. I mean, we've got a pretty robust staff that we can bring to any engagement. And then a lot of the clients that we work with, as you can see here, it's kind of a who's who of the architecture, engineering, and operations. The companies that we work with, not only are they who's who's, but they are also long-term clients of ours. Many customers that we have stay with us for 10, some even 20 years. Because we try to deliver value at every step of every engagement to these customers. And then our services that we offer, construction services, managed services, all the way through enterprise asset management. And this is really where we cover the entire lifespan of an asset, of the facility, was detailed as LOD 500 model development. We're able to manage the construction information, provide services for BIM model creation, connect the BIM models to the facility management system, help you with strategic planning, and then also do a Maximo system deployment. And Maximo, I'll go through some of the details about what Maximo is shortly. A little bit of eye candy here in terms of some of them. It's, again, it's large-scale institutions that we work with from both an enterprise asset management perspective, helping them plan and design their systems, all the way through implementation and support of their systems. So some of the challenges that we have going forward, and many of you will probably recognize this, this chart here. When you start to plot time versus knowledge in each one of the stages of an asset lifecycle, what we have is the traditional workflow, which shows that there's a knowledge gap that occurs between each one of these stages. Every time that information is handed off from one stage to the next, using whether it be 2D drawings, or you have to sort of recreate what it is that you're doing at every stage. Promise of being knowledge, a continuous set of one set of files that we can use throughout the entire life cycle of the asset. However, what we find is that between construction and operations, there is still a drop-off in information, and that knowledge gap is what we're trying to solve, and then facilitate the flow of information between construction and operations. In that handoff between construction and operations. So we typically look at an 18-month time period for this handoff. We talk about day one operations support, which is end of construction, end of major construction, and then the start of operations. And then during that time, what happens is the operators of the facility are looking for the O&M manuals. They're looking for the cut sheets, the equipment specification, even just a plain list of equipment. That's what they're expecting to get. But somewhere along the line in that 18-month cycle, the contractors will prepare their deliverables, and then there will be a construction closeout at day N, somewhere again in that continuum. But in the meantime, what we're seeing on the top of the line there is that the facility maintenance staff have to survey the facilities. They have to obtain the operations and maintenance manuals from the manufacturers, develop the preventive maintenance routines, replacing equipment that has failed. So again, we've started operations, and then somewhere in this 18-month period, information starts to flow over. And then we get the operations data delivery, and it looks something like what's in this picture. And I'm sure that many of you have seen this before, but now it sort of becomes more real, because now you're realizing that, oh, we've been maintaining this facility for 18 months, and yet we have paper files that we have to deal with, or, better to us on DVDs, which is just as cumbersome to deal with than having to actually have the data about what it is that's in the facility. When we start to break down the timelines here, what we have is a post-design period, construction coordination, commissioning, and then during that time there's an as-built model. But we have to have some kind of data transition into operations and maintenance. Traditionally, as we saw on the previous screen there, that data transition consists of rolls of drawings, buckets of drawings, or maybe a DVD of PDF files. But what happens is that the facilities operators need the information that's being generated. So that they need the 3D models, they need the floor plans, they need the product information. They most certainly absolutely need and want to have the warranty data. So what we can say is that the data that's generated from the BIM process is useful in operations. There's many different facets and components of this data that they really want. And so, like I said before, the data transition period now really becomes critical. How do we feed this information into operations so they have the information that they need? Just to sort of further, look into the details here, what happens is the equipment failure potential over the 18-month period is represented by a number of different curves. So this is a leading edge curve. There's a trailing edge curve where you would kind of expect that as a piece of equipment ages, the probability of it failing increases nearing the end of its life cycle. And then you have what's called the bathtub curve, where you have both leading and trailing indicators. So, but in this case here, we just look at the leading indicators of a new piece of equipment is installed, and that piece of equipment within the first 30, 60, 90 for failure. If you think about it, when you buy a new car, when you buy a piece of electronics, when you buy anything, there's typically a short period, like a 30-day warranty. Now, maybe not with a car, but with an electronics. 30-day warranty should anything go wrong, because the manufacturers realize that if something's going to go wrong with a piece of equipment, it generally speaking happens right away, as soon as it's starting to be used. Same thing with a car. Again, doesn't have to be that it's complete failure, but it means that somebody has to touch it. Somebody has to look at it. This curve here is showing that we have a high potential for failure, meaning that somebody has to touch the piece of equipment in the beginning of its life cycle. But yet, as you can see from the timeline, we're looking out about 18 months before the data is actually delivered to tell us what's going on with that facility. So we call this period here the operational blind spot. It's a period where they are looking for information, they don't have access to the information, and they're trying to gather the information while we have a high potential failure for the equipment. So let's see how we can eliminate this blind spot. I mean, that's really, that's kind of critical for operations. So we wanted to be able to provide visibility into the construction data, the warranty information, the product information, and the as-built models themselves. Because it's that visual of the as-built model that really facilitates operations and what they can do with the information. So in this case here, 3 key technologies need to come together. So we have an enterprise asset management system. In this case here, we're working with IBM Maximo, which is a worldwide leader in enterprise asset management systems. We need an as-built modeling platform, which in this case, again, another worldwide leader, which is the Autodesk Revit platform. And then we need a data transition toolkit. So in this case here, it's our ModelStream product, which allows us to take the data from the Revit model, bring it over to Maximo, and then back from Maximo into the Revit model itself. By asset data, location information, all gets transmitted back and forth between the 2 systems. As-built models now actually become what we call record models of the facility, and they actually have a life that's equal to the life of the facility. So you think about it, when you go ahead and you build an as-built model of a facility, 6 months after that as-built model is done, it's out of date because some equipment has failed, something has been replaced, something has changed within the facility, and that information is no longer reflected back in the as-built model. So again, the old way is that you have to then go back out, resurvey the facility, look for what's changed, do some data entry, do some updates to the Revit model to keep it up to date. Now with ModelStream, we're able to push and pull the data back and forth and allow for seamless communication back and forth. So ModelStream from Maximo, what it's representing is a better way to communicate and utilize the BIM process. So it allows us to use, we leverage BIM for the conceptualization, the analysis, the design and documentation, the construction process, the asset commissioning, the data transition process that we talked about before, and for maintenance and operations. One central source of truth feeding all of these different processes. So again, we talk about ModelStream as being the data transition piece, IBM Maximo supporting the operations and maintenance using their enterprise asset management platform. And this allows us to create the assets within the Maximo system, populate all the attribute data, create a location hierarchy. And a location hierarchy is critical because that allows you to quickly narrow the field of assets that you're working with. Asset attachments and links that get retained. And then this, again, this bidirectional piece that we talked about before, that's a critical piece. So let's now move over into our Maximo system and talk about Maximo for a little while as to how we can use that and leverage that. So what we're looking at here is the Start Center for IBM Maximo. IBM Maximo allows us to do a large, which is, I guess, an understatement, a large number of functions within the enterprise. As you can see, I'm logged in here as an administrator, so I have access to everything that Maximo can do. So Maximo will do everything from work orders, service stats, inventory, financial. There's a whole chart of accounts that goes into the system here, so you have there's a complete financial analysis component to this. The BIM models themselves are assets, which we'll focus on first, analytics as well. With integration and enterprise reporting systems themselves. So it's a complete enterprise management tool. If we look at the dashboard, dashboards are a way that we can allow ourselves to see very quickly what's happening within the organization. So in this case here, so this is a specialty dashboard that I have, and I'm looking at actually structural models. So if I want to understand for a bridge, how many components of the bridge are rated in poor condition, I can quickly get an indicator for that. If I want to see what the length, the total length is of the bridge members are that are in poor condition, I can see that. And these are all very simple calculations that are done based upon the data that comes from the Revit models themselves. But if we go over here to assets, and we're going to focus mostly on buildings today, so we can look at a building. Let's just let this open it for a second. So everything in most of the, if not all of the enterprise asset management, tabular in nature. So if I go ahead and click return here, I can see that there is a lot. There's like 1,400 assets that are in here, including some test assets. But if I go ahead, just again, I'm looking at an asset. So what is an asset? Let's just talk about that for a second. An asset is something that you do maintenance on, something that you have to do a preventive maintenance routine on, something that you have to report on for an external reporting agency, something that is involved in a safety plan. Safety plan meaning that, let's say you have to power something down before you work on it. So a circuit breaker panel would become an asset because you need an electrician to shut circuit breakers off for a certain piece of equipment to be worked on. So these are kind of the things that making systems for buildings. That's a very visual example of what an asset looks like. But again, we have 1,400 assets here. Again, organizations can have 5, 10, 50,000 assets. How do we start to filter that down? So what we do is we look at this location hierarchy here, and we can see we have a building in here with different floors. So if I just want to look at what's on the 6th floor of this building, now you'll see I only have 16 assets that I'm dealing with. Now, this is important because maybe I want to start to look at what assets I have in my system on a particular floor. Maybe I'm trying to do some inventory or trying to assess workload. So if I look at this, let's pick this asset here. This is a cooling tower. And what this does is this opens up what we call the asset record. There's a lot of information within this asset record itself here. I can get everything from downtime, purchase information, address of the equipment, all the details around it, serial numbers, so forth. I can also see there's one here. Of course, pick the one that doesn't have an attachment to it, but that's okay. I can see what spare parts are associated with the equipment, meters, and then specifications are things like make, model. I got 8 pieces of information here for this particular asset. And then I can also click on these arrows and start to look at different pieces of information, or I can start to flip through my list of assets. So again, if I start to just flip through these assets, I can start to move between these, and this is the one that I should have picked originally. So here I have a cooling tower that has an attachment. And this is an attachment that came from the Revit model originally. So if you look at some of our past videos, you'll see that attachments that are associated with the Revit model get copied over into the Maximo system. So again, this is a very tabular type of interface. It doesn't give me a whole lot of context about where this asset is located, other than the fact that I know it's on the 6th floor because that's the location that I selected. So the one tab that's here is the Model Viewer tab, and this is really the tab that gets added as a part of ModelStream. So when I click on Model Viewer, what you'll see is that it starts to open up and then taking a few seconds. So what you'll see is that I've got all my architectural elements here. I've got my penthouse of the facility up here, and as this loads, it will start to bring up information about the asset itself, and then zoom in on where the asset itself is located. Uh, what I call context for the asset itself. And now we have the ability asset itself. Where is it? What's the context for the asset? And I can start to really dive into the details of the model itself. So I know that, you know, if I want to start to see different elements, how they're related to each other, where they're located, I can start to do that. I can click on an asset. For some reason, my model viewer here is not catching up to me just yet. So this is the cooling tower that we were calling up in the asset list. So now I see here, okay, I have the asset number itself. I know when it was last inspected. I know what's the warranty date on it. I know what if there's a unique asset ID for it, I have the unique asset ID. I know what the installation date was for it as well. But then not all, there's two pieces of information. There's the information that's contained within the Revit model itself, which has a lot of detail. And then there is the assets themselves. Okay, it finally caught up. As you can, I don't know if you saw the screen change there, but that, the model zoomed into where the asset was located. But if I look at the element tab here, so now I can actually see the Revit information that came from the model. So I can see what the level is according to the Revit model. I can see like cooling water, pressure drop, makeup water flow, heat loss. I can see all the details that come with that particular piece of equipment. And then as I move this around, I can also start to see what's related to it. So typically piping, elbows, and associated equipment like that are not considered assets. They're fixed pieces. But when you're going to do maintenance and operations, you want to understand what it is that's connected to the piece of equipment, how it's connected, how do I get to it. So in this case here, this piece here is a carbon steel pipe. And so you say, okay, well, that's great to know, but what it does is if you know that you're dealing with a leak in that particular area, you can stock up with piping or patching for piping ahead of time, so that when you go out there, you don't necessarily need to make multiple trips out there to do any work. You can also start to look and see in the context here, like where is what is, as you saw here, like this is different piping that we have, Schedule 40 carbon steel piping, what's connected to it. Maybe there's this is the hot water supply, where's the cold water supply, how are these assets actually organized, operating pressure. I mean, we give the operator more information that they could probably ever need, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because at some point in time they will need it. Maybe not need it on a day-to-day basis, but they will need it. If you get to see, also you get to see where the piping is, you get to see where the piping runs to as well. So if you know down into these pumps, into these valves, okay, so now I have a pump here, and I understand what the pump speed is, the material of the pump. I can also see, if it came from the Revit model, what is the make, model, manufacturer of that pump. But I can also look here and start to see what is, when was it in warranty? When did it come out of warranty? again, when I know that piece of equipment is connected to the area that I'm looking at with these assets. It's this contextual information that allows us to see how the assets are connected or interconnected with everything else. And it allows us to see what it is that we need to bring with us so that we are not making multiple trips out to the site. Now, it's all great, that we have, one asset, one view, but that's not necessarily how operations works on a day-to-day. Back to one of our other applications, we can start to look at the work orders. And if we go back here to work order tracking, so what you'll see is we only have a few work orders that are in here. But let's say that, this is, and again, the work order itself has plans, parts, related records, actuals. There's a lot of information that goes into the work order itself. But what I'm seeing here is that I've got now a number of different assets that are associated with this work order. And if I say, let's go back to the cooling tower. We'll use that as an example here. If I go here and I see, again, contextually, I may not know where those cooling towers are. Maybe I'm new to the project or new to the facility. I don't know exactly where they are. So we can go ahead and look in the model viewer and see. So it brings up the model again. And so now what you're seeing is that I had 3 assets on the work orders, and now I have 3 assets located in the model viewer. So there's cooling tower number 7736, 37, and 38. As I click on these, it just changes the context of the model viewer, allowing me to see each one of the cooling towers and move through them. Again, so that I can now grab, contextually what is connected to that cooling tower. What do I need to bring with me? What kind of piping it is? And where is it physically located? Same thing holds true if I go back here. If I want to clean these heating coils, let's see what comes up here. This is a work order that has a number of different assets that are associated with it. So there's about 7 assets in total. And as you can see, I've zoomed in on this first one here because that was the first one in our list. Again, it doesn't give me too much information as to where this is located, but now as I zoom out, you can start to see that that's actually a really small piece of equipment. But again, I can start to see, if I'm looking at this asset here, I want to look at the asset itself, I can start to see different pieces of information about it. So I know this is a hot water standard coil. And if I look at the Revit attributes for it, I can start to see what system this belongs to. And then I can also see where it's located. This is in corridor 03488. Because again, it's a very small piece of equipment, and I can now start to say, okay, if I am going to move around, and zoom in, and then as I move to the next one, you'll see now it does the same thing. It's going to actually, snap to where the next location is, and so forth. I can now, keep moving through these. And looking, at one that has piping associated with it. So I can see that piping, again, is not an asset. But if I want to see what it is that came from the Revit model itself, I can start to see like diameter of piping. I can start to see what type of piping it is. So we know that this is, hot water return piping. Here it's copper. Diameter of piping. Again, it gives me some context for the information, for the model, for the work that I'm going to be doing. And I can start to see how the equipment is organized and arranged within this within the facility itself. So these are, a couple of very quick and simple examples of how the 3D model interacts with the Maximo system. Maximo then has, a number of features. We could spend, a few more hours going through the various Maximo features. But again, contextually, this lets us understand that the 3D model integrates in with both work orders and because those are the two areas that really kind of benefit from using the 3D models the most. Some of these applications, if I'm looking at the financial data, we don't necessarily need to know that. If I'm looking at work orders, I'm looking at preventive maintenance becomes work orders. So work orders, again, is the end user facing part of the system. And it gives us the ability for the end worker to see where it is that they're doing their work. Assets are used to organize the information and then start to place them into PMs. So again, we want to give the context as to where the assets are located with the 3D models. So coming up near the last few minutes of it, well, what we're looking at here is, what cost and impact for owners is what we want to just kind of look at first. So if we look at some of the numbers, so what we understand is that, again, this is a post-construction world. It costs the owners 10 cents a square foot to understand the project closeout package. So if you don't have an as-built model, you're going to spend operations money, OPEX funds, at the rate of 10 cents per square foot to understand the project closeout package. Again, going back to that 18-month timeline, what the facility operators are doing is they're sort of backing into what those closeout packages were. So they're spending about 10 cents a square foot to do that. 23 cents a square foot is what is wasted on an annual basis. This is a key thing here. It's an annual number that organizations spend looking for information. So every time a work order is written and somebody has to hunt around for the O&M manuals for a piece of equipment, it costs, think about your, facility size, and then you can start to see how this number adds up. And part of our goal is to drive that cost down. We can drive that cost down to about 7 cents a square foot. So there's about a 16 cent per square foot savings that comes from having the BIM model and the Revit models integrated. And then we understand from the BIM world, so we can save CapEx funds in terms of the contract value through clash detection. And then we can understand that the construction timeline can also be reduced by about 7% by using the BIM process itself. So that means faster occupancy. Now, faster occupancy does not necessarily mean that you have day one operations starting, you're still running into the situation where you have that lag between information delivery. So yes, you finished construction early, but you still have the information lag. And then, as I alluded to before, we can start to shave that 23 cents a square foot down to 7 cents a square foot. But by just combining the BIM model with the maintenance management system, as we just saw in those two examples of assets and work orders, what we're really looking at is an overall 5% savings on operations. Think about it. When in some of our studies, what we did was you looked at the number of trips that somebody's making out to the job site. So if traditionally it's 4 trips to go to a job site, trip 1 is assess what it is that you're doing. You go back out there, you realize you're missing something, you come back to the shop to get some more, and you go back out to do the work, come back and back in. So there's typically about 4 trips that are made to a job site. By introducing the BIM model into this and being able to give that contextual information to the operators, that number of trips goes from 4 down to 1, maybe 2. And the savings, basically it's operational efficiency that you're building into this, it nets into a 5% savings for operations. So again, the result is that we have as-built models. Now becomes the record model is available, current, and valid for the entire life of the facility. The maintenance and operations staff get the visualization tool to embed within Maximo. They get the work area verification, and then the record model that's dynamic and it's connected to the operating environment for as long as the facility is operating. A couple of examples of where what this is done for, and again, this applies to a wide range of infrastructure. So for like the new Goethals Bridge, this was done where the bridge elements themselves become assets, and it's used for maintaining and inspecting the bridge. Denver International Airport, early adopter of this system. They use it now for renovation work that's being done. They're able to hand the model off and be able to update the model before they hand it off to the current operational information. Questions into the side there. Let's see. So I have a question here, and I'm not sure if everybody sees these on my screen here or not, but is Revit okay, is Maximo open to any version of Revit, or is it limited to the latest versions? Excellent question. So it will actually work with Maximo 7.5 and of 2017, 2018, and 2019 that it's working with. So yes, it handles all the latest versions of Maximo and the most current versions of Revit. Any other questions here? No other questions? Oh, there we go. So a question here about what kind of reports can be run. So there's a couple of different visualizations, and we've shown some of this in some of our past webinars, but there's 2 particular types of reports that can be run. For example, one very popular report is showing what pieces of equipment are going to be 6 months. But then at the same time, what we can do is in the Revit model itself, we can show where all of those pieces of equipment are. So you actually get, you not only get the tabular report of the list of equipment, but you get the visual as well of all the equipment. Another visual report that can be run with this system is showing where work fixed in 90 days. And that, again, is where we take the data from the Maximo system so that you can see the different work areas. Annual reporting, you can see what preventive maintenance routines are coming up. You can look at a forecast of work. You can see what work orders have been issued, what work orders are still open and haven't been closed. You can look at asset aging, so you can start to see, okay, assets were installed back in 20, assets were installed back in 1990, now they're, 20 some odd years old, almost 30 years old. So basically any way that you can picture slicing the data, you can generate a tabular report on that, and now you can also start to do those as visual aids as well. So I don't know if there's any other questions out there. Okay, so again, if there are no other questions, I really appreciate your time. You've been wonderful. Thank you for the questions. You have our contact information there. You can feel free to reach out to me as well if you have any questions or follow-up that you'd like. Again, thank you for your time. Have a wonderful day, and we'll hopefully see you in the next webinar.